That, my friends, is how you do an intro. Hey everybody, I'm Joe Gilder from Home Studio Corner. That intro was done by my friends Ben and Caitlin of Homestead Collective. Talked about them here on the podcast before. I produced a Christmas EP for them, and if you've done Mix Together, Season 2, that was the song Fool's Gold was their band, Sunday Muse, and now they've started a duo together. So they're just stupidly musical, and they just whip out an awesome intro in their spare time. So they have laid the gauntlet, by the way, of how this works. So I've been doing intros by myself, by my lonesome forever, and slowly you all are starting to do intros for me. I would love to not do an intro again, so feel free to send them over. I can't promise I'll always use them, but if they sound like that one, I'll absolutely use them. Go Google Homestead Collective or go to homesteadcollective.net to see what they are up to. They've got a Patreon thing. They've got these, if you're in the Philly area, they're doing like these meetings of artists and musicians. They're just super cool people, and you should support them. So, shameless plug over. It's not shameless. It's not even, they're not even me, so it's cool. It's cool. I can plug them. Okay. So if this is your first time here on the live stream, really glad you're here. If you are a podcast listener or you listen to this, watch this over on the YouTubes after we go live, I'd encourage you, nay, challenge you, to try to join us one week for the live Dealy Bob. It's super fun. That's where I get my questions. A long time ago, I would get my questions via email because that was the only place people would contact me. But now we've done this enough to where people will actually show up and hang out, and we can do questions live, radio style, except I don't let you talk. I only read your questions. Maybe one day we'll hook up and we can actually have conversations, but that could go very poorly, very quickly. So that's for the future. I need more technology to make that work. Or maybe you all just come over. You want to come over? Come hang out here. You could just sit. You could sit on the blue couch, and we could do anyway. So today, I actually literally started recording without knowing what I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to talk about songwriting because that's where my mind is right now. And because, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned it last week, I'm got an EP that I'm beginning to work on writing for, and I need to get a bunch of songs written by the end of this week. I believe my songwriting deadline is the end of this week. Let's consult ye old calendar. Yeah, no, survey says, this Saturday is when I set for my songwriting deadline, because the following Saturday is my pre-production deadline, because the following Wednesday is tracking day, which is going to be a lot of fun. Going to set up drums and bass, and I'll probably have my amps and guitars and everything set up, ready to go, and hopefully we'll have pre-produced a bunch of tracks beforehand, but it's all up in the air right now based on the songs, and I'm giving myself a little mini challenge within a challenge. So obviously I'm trying to get this EP done in 90 days. You'll hear more about that as I go. But I've noticed, you may have noticed as well, I tend to write pretty introspective songs, right? But also fairly on the negative side. Or if there's a positive spin on it, it's on the back end of a negative. It's kind of probably the way I think about life. I tend to think in terms of I don't tend to write when I'm happy. I tend to write when I'm bummed out and trying to work through something. So my songs tend to go that way. I would love to write some happier, more encouraging, upbeat stuff, if that makes sense. I don't know. So I've written a few. I was working on one this morning that I think I like. And then I was working on one yesterday. I didn't get, yeah. It was that's a little more on the negative side. So I may not keep that one. But then last week I worked on a few. And I've got one. You VIP members remember that one I wrote for that 1 hour challenge? I would definitely want to record that one and figure out a cool grooving version of that. So I'm just in a place of, and to top it off, last night I randomly went to the movies and saw The Greatest Showman, which a lot of people have not a lot, but several people I've seen post on Facebook that it was greatest movie. They've gone to see it 3 and 4 times. And I was in musicals in high school, so I have a little, and I did some different things in college, like I was in an opera once and did some different musicals. So I like musical theater type stuff quite a bit. And it was really good. Like it was obviously there's a cheeseball factor because it's a musical. But there was a lot of good, the songs surprised me. I was expecting super cheeseball songs that sounded like something out of like Oklahoma, but they were actually pretty modern sounding and lyrically were really cool and melodically were cool, and they had a lot of big chorus numbers where everybody was singing, but it had a cool vibe. Anyway, but they're all super like "you can do it" kind of songs, and so I'm not saying I want to do "you can do it" kind of songs, but I kind of do. I kind of want to go a little more. So it comes back to, I've got a buddy named Jeff. Jeff and I have known each other for several years. If you've heard my song "Free," the one with the rap from Low Pro, there's a sweet keyboard part on there. It's like a Fender Rhodes or a Wurlitzer sound. It's just killer. My buddy Jeff played that. He was randomly in town. He's a video editor from Hollywood who was randomly in Nashville and sat down, and I didn't even realize he could. I knew he played. I didn't know he could play that well, and he just crushed it. Anyway, Jeff's got a YouTube channel called Story Greenlight. So go subscribe. He does video editing in Hollywood for shows like American Ninja Warrior. So he's like a legit video editor and has a YouTube channel talking about how to do better video and do better storytelling over video using editing. Anyway, he was working on a new video for his channel, and he was saying, hey, if you've got any kind of upbeat, kind of positive music for the last part of the video, I'd love to throw it in there, or I can just use some of the stock stuff that I have. And I started thinking through, and I had maybe 2 songs that I thought would kind of work as like an upbeat, positive thing. The rest are in context of a video. You would hear the lyrics like Fighter, for example. It's the chorus is, if life is one big disappointment, then maybe I'm doing it right, or doing this thing right. Which is not exactly what you want at the end of your super motivational video. So anyway, I'm not saying I want to abandon all introspection, and I do feel like I add a lot of honesty to my songs, and I'm cool with that. I wouldn't mind being positive. I could use some more positivity in my own thought life, and maybe that'll spill over into my songs as well. So that's where I'm at as far as songwriting goes. So far, I've written and completed maybe 2 or 3, and then I've got 2 or 3 in like various stages of completion. And for me, it's I got to put it on the calendar, and I got to sit down, and I try to get a song written in an hour. That hasn't worked so well this time around. I'll get like half a song written, or get a couple of ideas down, and then I'll work on that one the next day. And that's working okay. I'm starting to get tired of sitting and just sitting with a guitar. I'm afraid I'll get too distracted, but I really want to get out the GarageBand app on my phone and write completely from that. If you haven't seen Graham Cochran's video where he recorded an entire song on his on GarageBand on his phone using the built-in microphone on his phone, it is ridiculous how good it sounds, especially when you know how it was done. So maybe that would, with having like that, the built-in drummer and loops and different effects and things, will probably muster up some different type tunes for me, which I could also do more, record stuff in and then do some recording while I'm writing. That can just get so easily distracting and waste way more time. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but that's where I'm at in this journey of writing songs for this EP. Boom. I'm going to be honest. After last week's boom debacle, this week's boom was on point. Sam Canucks here. What's up, Sammy boy? I wish we'd hung out more in LA. That's on me. I'm sorry. I was not feeling well that night. We should do that more. Okay, so now's the part where you don't have to listen to me anymore, and you can ask your questions, and I'll just answer questions for the next 20 minutes. Does that sound like a fair game? Super great. All right, Rob Nordvik, you're up first. When, why, and how would I properly use a dynamic EQ? I'm assuming when you say dynamic EQ that's essentially like a multiband compressor. I'm assuming that's how I'm going to answer it. I use multiband compressors to when an EQ won't work. So when there's stuff, like I use it on my mix bus a lot, which people say I shouldn't, but I'm like, whatever. And basically what it does is, for me, on a lot of mixes, there's a lot of buildup in the mid-range, and so I'll use a 3-band multi-band compressor, and it touches the low end and the high end a little bit, but it mainly touches the mid-range, which is where the vocals and the guitars and a lot of the instruments build up. So it already gives me a little bit of a dip there. So I'm not having to do quite as much EQ in the mids to take as much out, because it's doing a little bit of that. It's dangerous because you can end up with the smiley face EQ curve to your mixes where all the mids are squished way down and you just have lows and highs, which that doesn't sound good. But I do like it a little bit, just to tighten up the mid-range a little bit. Chris says, have you used the Music Memo app? I did at one point, and then I guess I switched phones, and now I just use the Voice Memo app. I haven't compared the two. I do like the way, I might do a video on this, I like the way the Voice Memo app lets you go in and add more audio. So if I have a song idea and I lay down the part so I don't forget it, I can go back into that file and hit edit, and I can swipe to the end and continue recording where I left off. So it could be 13 different times I'm sitting there thinking about that song, and I can add a piece to the end of it, and it just appends that to the audio file so it all stays in one place. That's really interesting to me because it allows me to not have to go back and start over from scratch re-recording it, and I also don't have to have 7 different files with that same song name. It's all under one thing, so I can kind of workshop a single song in one file name in the Memos app. Now, I'm assuming the Music Memos app does that as well. It never did well last time I tried to use it to like match the tempo or play a drum beat or anything. It was pretty horrible at that. I'm assuming that's only getting better. A99 says, I'm the best. Thanks, A99. When recording acoustic guitar, this is from Tress, or is it Trey? I'm sorry, I always forget. When you're recording acoustic and vocal demo, recording them separately, would you put them both through the same reverb bus to put them in the same space, or use a delay on the vocal and verb on the guitar? No comment, meaning, I wouldn't necessarily, if I'm doing a guitar vocal demo, I'm probably not using reverb, most likely. I don't love reverb on acoustic guitar, and I like it if it makes sense on a vocal. But typically, for me, when I think about a guitar vocal demo, I think about it's a demonstration, the dumb way of putting it, of what this singer-songwriter can do. And I like it to be just really raw if possible. Have I added reverb to guitar vocal demos? Yes. Typically, I'm only going to add it to the vocal because I just don't like the sound of acoustic guitar in reverb usually. But no, I'm the bigger picture, I'm never that concerned with putting things in the same space. I see people ask questions about that a lot, and I'm sure I've said something like that in the past, but I don't really feel there's any benefit. Like, we're recording, and if you're not recording them at the same time, I don't understand why you want them to sound like they're in the same space. I want each element to sound good. So like, if I'm doing a rock mix and the snare drum sounds awesome through this huge plate reverb, that's great. That makes the snare sound good. I don't then feel like I've got to put all the guitars and the rest of the drums and the vocals in that same plate reverb because they wouldn't sound good in that plate. I put the snare in there because it sounds good. I may put the toms in there and maybe like a electric guitar ambient part that just adds some width to it that makes it sound cool. But no, putting things in the same place I don't think makes any sense. Unless it's like a live recording and you're trying to make it sound like they're in like a club playing, but otherwise you just don't have to. And yes, this is the Mini K47 from Roswell. That's how you're hearing me silky smooth through the microphone. Pierre says, any tips for mixing violin? First tip is record it well because they can be harsh little suckers. Sometimes a ribbon mic works really well. Tips for mixing violin, don't be scared to cut some of the upper mid-range because that's where it gets really crispy. And reverb can be your friend if it makes sense for the song. Have you used the DAW mode on your Studio Live? Yes, I've answered that before. I have, but it messed up my Studio Live, so I reverted back, and I haven't gone back yet. It's a what is it? It's a beta version, so it's not like all the kinks have been worked out yet. Have you ever gotten invited to be on Pensado's place? Your friend Graham was. No, I haven't. Graham's channel is much bigger than me. He has a much bigger audience and influence. I think I've emailed or Facebook messaged their channel just to say hey, and they replied back, but I don't even know if it was Herb or Dave. I'd love to, but at the same time, I don't know how interested they'd be in me as a little home studio fella. A lot of questions coming in. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can, I promise. Songwriting question from Tim. What's your process for lead vocals? Do you start with the melody musically and add lyrics? Please explain your method. My method isn't super consistent. For example, I wrote a song in the shower the other day, just beating like 4 on the floor beat on the wall of the shower and singing a melody to it. That's not normal for me. Normally, I'm finding a chord progression and then kind of getting a melody along at the same time as writing the progression. That's my normal, but occasionally a melody comes out. And usually those melodies probably are a little more interesting because I wasn't trying to fit it into a chord progression. I just sang something. Then I went and figured out, okay, what key is that in? What chords go well with that melody? And it ends up being a little bit more interesting. So I'm probably going to try to do more of that a little bit because I want to do things that are fun to sing. Yes, I want them to be fun to play, but more than that, I want them to be fun to sing because if they're fun to sing, I'll probably sound better singing them and have more fun because they're fun. I said the word fun too many times just then, didn't I? Yeah, I did. Diego says, how often do you change guitar and bass strings? Not often enough. And how often would you change drum heads if you had a kit? I just change them when they start to hurt me. I know people who change every week, every session, every show. I'm too lazy. So once the strings start to sound dull or just refuse to stay in tune, like right now, I'm pretty sure I need to change the strings on my Gibson. This, you can almost see the strings are like wearing out on there. Then I'll change them. But I don't love the sound of bright new strings necessarily. I like them worn out a little bit anyway. So I just ride that train as long as I can. I'm probably a bad person to take advice on that though. Krivas says, when you write, produce, record, edit, mix, and master your own songs, how do you manage to hearing the song for the first time? Well, I don't. So I'm at a disadvantage most likely because it's all my own music. I came up with it. I wrote it. I performed it. I recorded it. I mixed it. I mastered it. So I'm terribly too involved in it. And you could make the argument that it would all come out better if I had someone else producing it and I was just the artist and someone else mixing it and mastering it. But the other piece of that puzzle is I really enjoy it. I like that process. To me, that's as much of me being an artist as I'm setting up microphones and messing with EQ plugins as it is when I'm sitting there playing and singing the song. So maybe one day I'll branch out and have somebody else produce it, but it's cheaper and more fun for me to do it myself. And I like both of those words. So there you go. Basilio, what's up, brother? Says, hey, Joe, any universal app you recommend for controlling your mixer DAW from your phone? I don't do it very much at all. I just use my laptop and like I'm doing it right now. I'm looking at the laptop, but it's actually showing me that screen so I can see what's going on. That's how I do it usually. There are good apps. I just haven't. I mean, the Studio Live app for doing cue mixes works well. I've used that before, but otherwise I just don't. I'm sitting right here. I might as well just control it from right here most of the time. Greetings from the UK from Danny. What's up, Danny? Loving the new series. As a complete noob to mixing, I'm finding it very helpful. Yeah, if you haven't been around my YouTube channel the last week, I did a 5-part series that ended today on kind of a 5-step mix process. If you kind of feel lost with mixing, I'd go through those videos. There's a playlist on my channel for those as well, so go check them out. David says, how do you gain stage for live sound at church? Do you take the same approach as in the studio? Well, I don't run live sound at church. I've got a guy that runs sound, but I mean, to me, it's just someone sings into the preamp, you turn it up to make sure it's not loud enough without clipping, and that's it. I'm not a gain stage dude. I look at the meter. Is it clipping? Okay. Is there headroom? Yes. Great. Let's make music. Maybe I should think about it more, but it just seems that simple to me. Any more series videos in the works, like your recent How to Mix videos? Romo Drummer, I probably need to do another mix together at some point. I just don't have any tunes that I'm mixing that would work for it. But maybe, who knows? I might. A lot of the stuff I'll come up with on Monday and start shooting the video on Tuesday. So who knows? I may come up with something today and start shooting it tomorrow. Here's a cool idea from Graze or Grazi. Says, to write a chorus, I ask someone to give me a number between 1 and 8, and that's the start note of the chorus. I love stuff like that. Then you have to figure out like what chord you're going to play underneath that, and where you're going to go from there. It's super interesting. What's something I don't like about the studio live? It's a little quirky. Like, for example, you're hearing, I set up like a, what do they call it? Like a matrix that is feeding the computer, so you hear what I'm hearing. But occasionally that matrix will just stop having, the right channel will just mute, and you'll just hear the left. And unless I'm looking at the meter in the software that I'm using to stream, I don't know it's happening. So I have to go in and take that matrix, unlink it, and then link it again, stereo link it, and it fixes itself. But I spent like an hour trying to figure out what the problem was, but I just needed to unlink it and link it again. So little quirks like that, which is, it's cool, it's digital, but sometimes there's digital quirks that you don't really get in an analog board because it's all wired up a certain way, right? The cool thing is they can add new features, but the downside is there can be little quirky things. Trevor says, hey Joe, is gain staging different when you add in routing like you talked about in your most recent series? I'm finding my overall peak levels are higher when I gain stage and then add in summing. So again, I'm not a gain stage guy. People love to talk about gain staging. I'm literally like, if I'm mixing a song, I set all the faders to 0, and then I just see if when I'm starting to do my rough mix, if I set the fader to 0 and the track is too loud, I'll turn the track down. If I set it to 0 and the track is too quiet, I turn the track up. But as far as like going in and getting every track to come in at a certain level, that feels a lot like math to me. And this is music, this is art. So I don't understand. And it also, this is the part that doesn't make sense to me. If I make all my tracks come in at -18, then if I have 16 tracks in a mix, then that is all going to combine to a certain output level. But if I have 60 tracks in a mix, then if they're all at the same level as the 16-track mix, it's going to be way louder. It's going to blow out my master bus. So it's completely irrelevant because however many tracks you have is going to be more volume if you do everything at the same level. Though I know there's reasons to do it, I feel like we're looking for excuses to not just mix and make it sound good. So if to answer your question, if you're doing something and your peak levels are high, if they're not clipping, don't worry about it. If they're getting close to clipping and you find yourself throwing that clip light off a lot, then I would literally just grab everything and pull it down a little bit. Super simple, and then get back to work mixing. Sorry, I just don't do the gain staging thing. Sam says, do you have any plugins? What's up, Sam? That mess or work the transients, like a transient shape or anything? I'm mixing a heavier rock album this week. I don't. I've heard, like Ronan Chris Murphy talks a lot about transient designers and things like that. The idea is interesting to me. I don't use them. I've never used them. I'm not against them. I just haven't. I like to see how far I can get with a compressor and messing with the attack and release times. Joe, if you have 2 extra mics, a condenser and a dynamic, which one would you use for the outside kick mic and which one for the room mic? Ooh, that's a good question. I've had good results with both. A condenser, as long as it can handle the volume, can give you a ton of low end for a kick out mic, but it's going to pick up a little more cymbals and a little more bleed in general. Room mics, I find I tend to, a lot of times, if I'm having a lot of room in my mix, I'm usually rolling off the highs anyway because there's too much cymbal there. So I'd probably opt for the condenser on the kick and the SM, whatever you said, the dynamic for the room. But you can always switch them pretty quickly and just see. The dynamic could work. I just haven't. It's usually always a condenser if I'm using an outside mic. The last several times I've done drums, not here at my place. So hope that helps. Krivas says, acoustic treatment, you did it by ear or did you take measurement or pay someone else to do it? If you look around my room, there's not a lot. I've got some treatment there, and back behind you is a bunch of treatment. I just put it up in the reflection points. So my speakers are here. I put it up where the sound would bounce off the wall and come back. That's it. And when I'm recording, I go over in that corner behind you and I wheel that big gobo around. I've got another one here, and I make kind of a U shape, and I sit kind of in the U or stand in the U, and that's where I record. Gives me a nice dead sound. Could it be better? Yeah, absolutely. Could someone come and measure and properly treat it? Sure. Am I unable to make good music in the meantime? No. Which isn't what a lot of people want to hear. How close are your monitors? The rule of thumb is it should make an equilateral triangle with your head. Now, if you didn't pay attention in geometry, that just means a triangle where all sides are equal. So if I'm sitting here, then my speakers are the same distance from each other as each one is from me. roughly. And that's where I try to go. I'm usually probably a little bit closer than I should be, or I should bring the speakers in, but that's the rule of thumb. But in a grander sense, it doesn't really matter. Just get a good mix. Romo just ordered a PreSonus monitor station. Very cool. Do I have any experiences with it? No, I don't, but I would use one. If I didn't have the central station, I'd totally use one of those. I kind of like the way it looks. I like the kind of desktop layout. It wouldn't work on my desk as well, but if I didn't have this desk and a central station, I'd totally go for that. What type of pick do you use for your acoustic guitar? I mostly, the last couple of years, have been like a Jazz 3 dude. So it's tiny and it's stupid thick. It's like, I want to say it's like 2 millimeters, maybe 3. They're really thick. They don't bend at all. I've just gotten to where it was mostly for electric. I kept not missing strings, and this made me not able to miss it because it's just so small and so thick. And I'll switch up picks if I need a brighter sound, but I've gotten to where I like the sound of that a lot. I'll go thinner a little bit, like 70 millimeter nylon picks. That's about as light as I'll go, unless I'm going for a certain effect. Do you use automation on the no plugins phase of the mix? No, I don't. Occasionally I have, but in general, it's just volume and faders. And yeah, that means some things are going to be too loud in sections and not in others. You can make an argument to go ahead and do some automation there. I've done it before and actually thought, hey, this actually makes a lot of sense. I should do this more. I just haven't done it myself. What's up, Dr. McFarland? This is from Jarrell, do you use analog tape plugins on your buses? I don't. Studio One has built-in console. What's it called? What's it called? Mix effects. What's it called? Console Shaper is what it's called. I'll use that, so it gives it the sound of a console. I think they're coming out with a bunch of different consoles soon. Maybe I heard that, or there's a pack you can buy. I'll use that. And so it kind of darkens up and the sound a little bit overall, but that's it. I'm not against them. I'm just a big fan of using what I have, and this is what I have, so I just use that. Dr. McFarland says, I'm trying to do some reamping today of a metal track that provided a DI guitar track. Should be fun. Yeah, dude. I always like the idea of reamping, and then I'm just too lazy to do it. Randy, what are your mixing and mastering rates? Depends on what you got. Why don't you contact me on email? Danny says, in your mix practice product, are the audio files in the raw events from the session, or do they have any EQ on them, etc.? No, they're raw. There's no EQ because otherwise that's already mixed, and the whole point is for you to take the raw tracks and mix them yourself. So yeah, it's just the raw, unadulterated tracks. Is a video about DAW mode coming? Yes, once I get it working. I've got like 25 videos slated to come out about it once it comes out. My little deal with PreSonus. So funny, people will comment and be like, he obviously has a deal with PreSonus. I'm like, yeah, of course. We likes each other. How do you manage your time? Calendar, notebook, habit tracker, what apps do you use? Roberts, good question. I don't use an app other than my calendar. So anything that's not happening today goes on the calendar. And if it's important, it goes on the calendar. If I need to follow up on something, calendar. If I need to mix a song, calendar. And then when the week rolls around or the day, then I've got a system I use and a notebook. It goes into my notebook for that day, and that's how I track everything from there. Everything gets planned out. I've got this whole process. I actually talked about it in my home studio business course that I just finished, and it stays there. I can get super lost in an app, and I've gone into those really cool productivity apps, and I will fill them up with 1,000 things to do. And guess what? I don't do them. I just have a lot of fun messing around with organizing my to-dos, but I never to-do anything. So my solution to that is to put it on a calendar and put it in here, and it ends up just being the important stuff that I end up getting to versus a huge list of things that I might kind of want to. That works well for me, and I'm able to get a lot done that way. Just apps for me are too big of a distraction. Writing things down on paper makes me feel, see, look, doesn't that just look completely non-legible and make you happy? It makes me happy. All right, the music is playing, which means I am totally out of time. I'd love for you to join me next week. Won't you?